I think that kind of leads us into why the Institute of Noetic Sciences is what it is, why the program area exists at all. And it comes really from the beginnings of our creation story. Edgar Mitchell's experience of coming back from deep space, from having his walk on the moon, which was historic, and then seeing reality in a way that was different from his training as an MIT engineer. And so as an MIT engineer, he had been taught to trust the utility of Newtonian physics and the idea of an objective world out there, a world that we can manipulate, that we can conquer. And what he saw on the way home was this deeper sense of interconnectedness, and what he later described as having had a Samadhi experience, a sense of unity. And so in that moment, it was a shift of worldview. He had come from this materialist, physicalist model, which he still very much believes in and trusts, but at the same time he became aware of sort of a more imbued sense of deep spirituality in all of that, and the interconnectedness that the mystics talk about. And so I think from the very beginnings of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, this idea of worldview is actually fundamental. It's fundamental to the inception of an institute that would really be devoted to considering the ways in which we form these models of reality, that the only valid reality is that physical world out there that Edgar learned at MIT, then coming into some kind of relationship with this deeper knowing, this noetic knowing, this inner state of knowing that began to imbue his worldview with a different set of possibilities. So in many ways he had sort of converging worldviews or emerging worldviews within one person. And considering that if you could begin to allow people to reflect on those kind of blinders that you were talking about in the case of Darwin, and for us to begin to see the blinders that we're carrying with us, then perhaps we can begin to, problem solve in an entirely new way, as Einstein talked about, getting out of the box in order to begin to see things in a different sort of paradigm or worldview.
I like the word emerging worldview, and it reminds me of many theorists who have talked about emergence and emergent worldviews, which is, I think, the sense that it's not as though we're trying to bring some new fixed worldview into our mental state, because I think that's what we tend to do, is say, oh, my old worldview was so limited, get it out of here. I want a new worldview that I can fix on, that's going to provide me all the formulas now for everything that's going to work. And what does that become? But yet another rigid worldview that is even maybe more impervious to being flexible. So emergent, I think, speaks to the idea of being able to actually hold passions very deeply and at the same time be consistently flexible to new information that might shift.
It also speaks to our unique moment in history and also the unique nature of the culture in which we're embedded. So I'm talking we being the United States and this kind of liberal, democratic, pluralist kind of philosophy. And really it's a privilege. Up until a couple hundred years ago, really, there wasn't this sense of convergence. People from different cultures held views. There was a continuity of worldview. Indigenous cultures hold, you look at the Tibetan culture and you think about, thousands of years of a particular model that was, continued over generations and reproduced in ways that are quite systematic. And then you think about what you're saying, this kind of fluidity of worldview, and that's now an opportunity for us because we live in a country that allows us to think about the me rather than only the we. We're not simply embedded in a collective culture that dictates our model of reality. And at the same time, I think that there's something very liberating in that process, and there's also something very frightening. And I think a big part of what kind of the crisis of our times reflects is we're at a time between meaning systems and between stories, and so how do we begin to navigate that?